Hello, everyone. So this is just a quick reminder for those who may not have heard that I've joined the Chilling family, and I want to make sure you take advantage of the free trial if you haven't done so yet. Chilling is the new home of horror and an amazing mobile app that allows you to do things that are not quite possible on YouTube. Chilling has hundreds of amazing stories, almost in the thousands now, and these are sorted into curated playlists, and if you want, you can create your own. We give you so much flexibility to listen to things just the way you want. And this, of course, includes the Chilling exclusive feature, our very own ambient menu. That's right, you can change the background noise of the story at will to fit your mood. Now, this is an absolute game changer. Of course, this is offered completely and totally ad-free. Yes, that's right, no ads, just hours and hours of uninterrupted, horrifying, creepy, and all-around spooky content. Well, I couldn't be more excited to have the opportunity to be a part of this journey, and I really hope you can join us. So, download now and start your free trial today. Click the link in the description below or simply search for Chilling in the App Store. It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen. Tonight, we see the triumphant return of Operation Appletree. Now we're all done with part 1, so it's time for us to move on to part 2. Operation Appletree by Luke Hemingway. Chapter 11. Everyone sat down around the meeting table while Special Agent Martinez stood at the front of the room, ready to start the presentation. I noticed everyone looking anxiously at the empty seat where Supervisory Special Agent Michaels used to sit. Martinez looked at everyone, assessing if they were ready to listen and take notes. We all gestured for him to start. He raised a Bluetooth remote and clicked it. A photo of Ian Malek appeared on the screen. On the 17th of May, an interview was conducted with Ian Malek by the Soup, Agent Mitchell, and Special Agent Michaels. The reason for these people being present was due to the Soup being the ranking agent. Agent Mitchell was responsible for the financial records which gave us cause to arrest Malek. Given a strong evidential link between Malek and an organized crime group, Special Agent Michaels was recommended to conduct the lion's share of the interview, given his experience with serious and organized crime. Martinez finished his introduction and clicked on the remote, changing the image to 2 screenshots, each of a length of text with certain passages highlighted. On screen is a partial transcript of the interview. Okay, well, I think that's everything. But here's what happens now, Mr. Malek. You go back to your lucrative position as a child abuse facilitator, and you continue business as usual. Except the next time you get a text from this Mark telling you Mr. Johnson or whoever is just dropping by to rape a child at 10 a.m., well then, you contact us. Do you know what'll happen if these guys find out what I'm doing? With any luck, something along the lines of what you've helped those men put those boys through all these years. Oh, please look at the second text. One more thing. Write down Mark's current burner number. We need to track his movements. You'll also need to update us when he changes his number. Aye, aye, Captain. Interview terminated at 6:09 p.m. Get this piece of shit out of here, please, James. Myself and the Soup both attempted to calm Michaels down outside the interview room. Unfortunately, the conversation was not transcribed. However, both myself and the Soup agreed on 3 key phrases that Michaels used. Martinez said, clicking the remote, revealing a slide containing the following text. 1. He's just gonna get free, and I can't get right with that. 2. Those boys need us. The abuse needs to stop. We can't let it carry on. 3. Another monster is gonna go free. Martinez allowed everyone to read the 3 comments. Special Agent Michaels was clearly angry about the fact that, despite admitting to the sexual exploitation of vulnerable boys who were roughly the same age as his 2 sons, Danny and Sean, Ian Malik was not only going to receive immunity from prosecution, but also to stay within receipt of the profits of that very crime. Marshall spun around in his chair, a baffled look on his face. "Are you freaking serious?" he demanded to know. Martinez scowled at him. I tried to calm him with a non-verbal gesture, but it was no use. He was off. He rightly doesn't agree with a sex offender being allowed to carry on as normal and voices his opinion. We've all been there. I mean, yeah, making deals is how we get the bigger fish, but, I mean, it doesn't have to be like this, does it? Like I said, at the hospital, Marty, you IAD boys just like fitting up your own, he said, aiming his derogatory remarks at Martinez. We looked over to see how Martinez would react, but instead he just stayed silent and continued by pressing the Bluetooth remote. An image appeared on screen of a dark road. The charred remains of a vehicle's chassis were the centerpiece of the image. In the background were 2 forensic tents and around 6 people in white oversuits. The image was clear enough to see a large amount of bullet casings spread out across the road. In the early hours of the 18th of May, an attempt on Ian Malik's life was carried out. Mr. Malik survived the initial attack but succumbed to his injuries at 6:04 a.m. that same day. He died after a series of cardiac arrests and seizures, after his organs had failed him. During the attempt on his life, Malik suffered 9 serious GSWs, and 67% of his body was affected by 4th-degree burns, Martinez informed us somberly. He clicked the button once more, this time revealing an image of a timeline. What you're looking at is a comprehensive timeline of the events of the evening of the 17th of May through to the early hours of the 18th of May, compiled from 2 radio transcripts, witness statements, and surveillance logs. At 8 p.m., Ian Malik is set to be transported back to his home address of 149 Anderson Road, Prairie Park in Lawrence. However, at 7:50 p.m., security gets a call from the surveillance operatives assigned to watch Malik's place of work and residence. They report seeing a black SUV that's been continuously circling the area, every 10 minutes from 7 p.m. onwards. They ran the place, but they came back as fake. As at this point, they advised HQ against transporting Malik, as they believed the OCG were watching the house. He tapped the remote, and the timeline expanded, revealing a small photo taken of the black SUV. Surveillance eventually gave the all-clear regarding Mr. Malik's home address, and the transport was recorded as leaving HQ at 11:43 p.m., with an expected travel time of 49 minutes. They opted to take the route of Highway 70 due to planned roadworks along Highway 10, which could leave them stationary and therefore vulnerable. Malik was in the back seat with Security Officer Richards. Officer Neal was driving and Officer Rodman was in the front passenger seat. Martinez then clicked on the timeline section, labeled 12:16 a.m. It expanded into a section of text. It was a transcript. As you can see, at roughly 12:15, the vehicle is traveling along Highway 70, just outside Fairmont, when Officer Rodman radios into HQ, informing them that they have just encountered another vehicle, which had been in a suspected traffic collision. I'm going to play an audio recording from HQ of the radio transmission.
1050 RDA up ahead. Looks like a PI. HQ, notify emergency services. Convoy continuing, 1076.
Notifying ES now.
Holy shit. Neil, stop.
Rodman, what's your sit-rep?
RDA has caught fire. Driver trapped inside. I'm holding the convoy, rendering assistance.
Rodman, that's against protocol. ES on the way, stay in vehicle. Radio silence for 10 seconds, followed by 2 bursts of gunfire.
Fuck. 1019, officers down. Urgent, 1078, under fire from armed suspects of dog balaclavas. Oh, fuck.
2 more bursts of gunfire. And the audio ended there. Martinez turned to face the room once more. When emergency services arrived at the scene, they found our convoy vehicle, and the vehicle that was suspected to have been an RTA. Both vehicles were on fire. They found 4 bodies at the scene. Neal and Rodman were found lying in the middle of the road with GSWs to the head and chest. They were both pronounced dead at the scene. The other two bodies were Richards and Malik. Both had suffered serious GSWs to the neck, chest, and legs. Both had also suffered serious burns. Having sequestered the crime scene reports from the state PD, they then found that a third set of tire tracks, which were found to have led away from the scene, well, forensics report that they belonged to a large vehicle, most likely a transit van. Despite Rodman stating that there was a man in the RTA vehicle, no such individual was found at the scene. Fire investigator reports state that the fire was started with an alcohol-based accelerant, and given that they found broken glass inside the car, separate from the window, they stated it was likely a Molotov cocktail. Piecing together from the transcripts and the reports, we believe the RTA was a trap. The fire meant there was an immediate threat to life and therefore a great chance the convoy would stop and the guards would exit the vehicle. And we believe at this point, Neil stopped the convoy and he and Rodman exited the vehicle, leaving Richards to stay with Malik. The ambushers then shot the two officers from a hidden vantage point before moving into the convoy. They fired shots through the windows at Richards and Malik before throwing the cocktail inside the vehicle. Piecing together from the transcripts and the reports, we believe the RTA was a trap. The suspects fled the scene shortly after, leaving Malik and Richards for dead. It's unclear what happened between then and when ES arrived on the scene, but it's likely Richards, who was sat in the far side of the vehicle and therefore further away from the bullets and flames, was able to get out of the vehicle and help pull Malik out onto the road. Malik was found by ES with a raincoat over his body. This, along with the heavy rain that night, contributed to the flames being extinguished. Richards was found unconscious in a nearby puddle. It's likely he extinguished himself, but passed out from blood loss before ES arrived. Malik died from his injuries, but Richards is currently described as critical but stable, which essentially means he isn't out of the woods yet, but there's a good chance of survival. Martinez finished his overview of the ambush, clicking the remote as he went to show us corresponding images taken from the crime scene. We all took a moment to take in the harrowing details. As horrible as this all is, still don't see where Michaels comes into it, Marshall stated, arms folded, shaking his head. Martinez once again didn't react. Instead, he calmly said, "Well, please pay attention to the next slide." He clicked the remote and an image of two sets of cell phone records came onto the screen, along with a photo of a piece of paper with a cell phone number written on it. The image on the right is the phone number of the OCG nominal we know as Mark, which was written by Ian Malik and given to Special Agent Michaels during his interview. The phone records on the left are what we harvested from the number associated with Mark's current burner phone. Said phone is no longer active, but let's look at the last few calls. The first is an incoming from 816-471-4110, with the call occurring at 7:27 p.m. and lasting 2 minutes and 37 seconds. Mark then makes an outgoing call to a number attached to an unregistered cell phone. Said cell phone is no longer active, and the number records show that the phone only received calls from Mark on this night. The phone made no outgoing calls. The first call between these two numbers occurs almost immediately after the call from the first number ends and lasts 1 minute and 17 seconds. At 11:23 p.m., Mark contacts the other burner phone, and the call lasts no more than 7 seconds. At 11:53 p.m., the 816 number contacts Mark once more, and the call lasts 23 seconds. After this, Mark and the unknown burner phone become unavailable. 23 minutes later, the ambush takes place. And we believe the 816 number notifies Mark of Malik's cooperation in the plan to transport him back to Lawrence. However, Mark and other OCG nominals need time to plan the ambush. Mark then contacts the second burner phone, which probably belongs to the nominals in the vehicle that was circling Malik's block. The 816 number likely notified them of the surveillance, and therefore this would delay the transport and give time for the ambushes to set up. Once everything's in place, Mark calls off the surveillance and the transport gets set to leave HQ. When it does, the 816 number contacts Mark and notifies him of the route. Now, to do this, the person calling from the 816 number would have to gain access to the transport's GPS tracker serial number and track the convoy. Only someone with access to HQ could have done that, Martinez stated suggestively. Marshall once again scoffed. That could have been any one of us. Well, like James said, it could have been one of the security on the take. The OCG killed them to tie up the loose ends. But once again, Martinez didn't respond. Instead, just shook his head with reluctancy and regret. He clicked the button once more. 2 images came up. One was of another screenshot of call records. Amongst the list of numbers, 3 were highlighted. The other image was of a Samsung cell phone. On screen was a GSP app. On the right is the call records of the 816 number. Highlighted are the 2 calls to Mark. The numbers linked to a phone box in the Parkview area of downtown KC. We've also highlighted a number that the 816 number called no more than 35 minutes before the first call to Mark. And we've traced the number. It's Jerry Michaels' home address. Martinez's revelation stunned the room. Even Marshall had a tough time getting his words out. Well, that's speculation, circumstantial at best, he muttered. I could barely look him in the eyes. I was already appraised of the facts. The phone box is located no more than a 6-minute walk from the Century Towers apartments where Michaels was renting accommodation via Airbnb for the 6-week duration of Operation Appletree. The second image was taken on the 18th of May at 7:23 a.m. during a lawful search of apartment 3A of the Century Towers building. Here we found Special Agent Jerry Michaels and his phone, switched off at the time, but once charged and switched on, we discovered the GPS tracker app with the tracker serial number of the ambushed transport vehicle, saved on the app. Martinez revealed. And the whole room, including Marshall, was stunned into silence. Well, we've placed him under federal arrest for conspiracy to murder a federal witness. He's in the interview room. Myself and Martinez are going to interview him after this meeting, I added softly. Can't believe it. You work with someone and all this time, they're working for the other side, Sarah gasped, a rage building in her tone. Ruth shook her head in agreed disgust over his actions. Martinez held his hands up. Look, I guess we don't know all the facts, but I don't think he's working for the OCG. I just think he let his emotions get the better of him, Martinez speculated, diplomatically. What do you mean? Marshall asked. Well, we only found evidence that he conspired with the OCG in order to murder Ian Malik. We didn't find any evidence that showed that they had a previous relationship. I think Malik got under his skin. You've all heard the interview. He bragged about boys getting raped and his bank account filling up as a result. Jez has 2 boys, same age as those abused at Lawrence. Maybe he called home, heard their voices, imagined it was them suffering, made the call to Mark. Maybe they promised him no one other than Malik would be hurt, and he chose to believe them. Martinez ventured. Either way, 2 of our own dead. In intensive care, one of them with life-changing injuries. And our best witness burned to a crisp, I stated. So, we regroup and focus on our other leads. Myself and Martinez will conduct the interview with Michaels. Ruth and Sarah go over the cell phone records for Nathan and Mark and find out the hotspots where the phones were regularly used. Try and get us some places of interest. Get onto the DOJ and chase up those warrants. Oh yeah, did you get the CCTV from the nightclub? I asked, my gaze now turning to Marshall. Marshall pinched his nose hard and shook his head. Apparently the cameras weren't working for a period that night, he revealed. Let me guess, the period during the assault? I asked expectantly. Yeah, Marshall answered reluctantly, and I shook my head in disappointment. It just seems everything's going to shit when it was all going so well, I said, to no one in particular, as I left the room with Martinez. I closed the door behind us and we made our way to the interview room. Just before we entered, I turned to Martinez. I don't care how long you worked with him, what you think of him or what you think happened. We treat him like any other suspect, agreed? I demanded. Martinez nodded his head, trying to prove to me he was ready. But I could tell he wasn't. Not really. Well, being an IAD, you investigate your own all the time. But when it's your friend, your mentor, that's a different story. So, we entered the room. Chapter 12. Michaels immediately shot out of his seat in a panic. "Soup, there's been some sort of mistake here. I didn't do anything," he pleaded. I did my best to keep an impartial demeanor and gestured for him to retake his seat. "Please, Jazz, let's not make this any harder than it has to be," Martinez requested. "Oh, come on, Tony. James, you can't possibly think I had anything to do with that ambush." We didn't respond. It wouldn't have been ethical. Instead, we took our seats and Martinez pressed the record button. Federal interview commencing 18th May 2019, 10:02 a.m. Special Agent Gerald Michaels. Present is Supervisory Agent James Rodriguez and Special Agent Anthony Martinez. Jerry Michaels, you've been placed under arrest for the charges of conspiracy to murder a federal witness and malfeasance in office. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you do say will be used against you in a court of law. You've waived the right to legal representation. "'Cause I've done nothing wrong," he yelled, interrupting me. "You accept the caution?" I asked for confirmation. Michaels, tears bursting through his tough exterior, nodded reluctantly. "For the tape, please." "Yeah, I accept the caution," he muttered. "Okay, thank you. All right, let's begin. S.A. Michaels, on the 17th of May this year, you were present in a post-charge interview with Mr. Ian Malik, which was conducted by you, myself, and Agent Sarah Mitchell, yes?" "Yeah," he responded, stating the obvious. And during this interview, Mr. Malik confessed to a number of crimes, including fraud and embezzlement. However, the two main crimes he confessed to, they were conspiracy to commit rape and also facilitating and profiting from the sexual exploitation of children. "Jerry, do you have children?" I asked. "You know I do," he answered, with an edge to his tone, as if he'd totally forgotten how we have to conduct interviews. And during the interview, and afterwards as well, you expressed anger, frustration, and contempt at the fact we decided to offer Ian Malik immunity from prosecution and allowed him to continue as governor of the Lawrence Home for Boys in order to obtain further and more high-profile arrests. In fact, when Ian Malik asked you if you know what would happen to him should the OCG we're investigating find out about his cooperation with said investigation, well, you replied, "With any luck, something along the lines of the pain and suffering you and those men have put those boys through all these years." Well, that's from the interview transcript. I think it's fair to say you were extremely disturbed by Ian Malik's admissions, weren't you?
Oh, who wouldn't be?
But you were overly disturbed, weren't you, Special Agent Michaels? In fact, in a verbal altercation between yourself, me, and S.A. Martinez, you continued to voice your dismay over the situation. In fact, you said, and I quote, "He'll just go to another party and meet some other bad people, and he'll do the same for them. He can't just get away with it." You were also quoted saying, "He's just gonna walk free, and I just can't get right with that." Did you confirm saying this to myself and S.A. Martinez? I asked.
"Oh, come on. I was upset. We all know how the system works, but that doesn't mean it makes it any easier to digest, does it? This doesn't mean anything,"
he asserted. "Yes, we do, but this one really got under your skin, didn't it? This guy sat there and bragged to your face that he had vulnerable children beaten and raped, children who were the same age as your two sons, and not only that, but he wasn't going to be punished. That really boiled your blood, didn't it?" I asked forcefully. Michael shook his head in disbelief at this situation. "When Ian Malik put the idea in your head that tipping off the OCG to his cooperation would result in his brutal murder, you, in a fit of blind rage, acted on that, didn't you?"
"Didn't. It had to be someone else. This is just circumstantial bullshit," Michael snapped, slamming his fists on the table. I took a few seconds to let the dust settle before nodding in agreement.
"Yes, you're right, it is," I admitted, causing Michaels to look at me confused. "You're currently staying in a rented property for the duration of this investigation. It's apartment 3A Century Towers, correct?"
Yeah, he sighed. After our heated discussion in these very hallways about Ian Malick's immunity, I sent you home early for the day at roughly 6:20 p.m. Where did you go when you left here? I quizzed. I left here and went back to the apartment. I was angry, so I took your advice. Went to the store and bought a bottle of bourbon. Started drinking it, passed out around 9. I next woke up about 7 a.m. when you and your forensics were kicking my door in. He sulked. After the rest of the team left the office that night, I tried to call you, see how you are, and update you on what you'd missed in the last briefing. However, your cell went straight to the mailbox. I lost my phone. I couldn't find it. Had it in the office, but I didn't realize I didn't have it until I got back to my apartment. Well, so what? So with no phone, you were unreachable and unaccounted for during a key period in the timeline, I answered. Well, losing your phone isn't a crime, is it? This is more circumstantial bullshit, Michaels exclaimed. Once again, I let his emotions calm before firing back at him. Around 600 yards from Century Towers is a phone box in the corner of Brooklyn Avenue. Did you make a call from this phone box on the evening of 17th of May? I asked. Yeah, I called home to speak to my wife and kids, he admitted cautiously. And what time was this? 7:30? He ventured. Well, it was 6:55 p.m. actually, I corrected. All right, yeah, I'd had a drink. Didn't know the time. Didn't think it mattered. Is it a crime to call your family now? Michael snapped. Well, maybe you're mixing the call up with another one you made from that phone box, I asked suggestively. Michaels looked at me baffled. What other call? I called my wife and kids. 10 minutes. The credit ran out and I went back to the apartment. I didn't make any other call. I freaking swear to God. Michaels was pleading for us to believe him. I remained calm, though, as hard as it was, because, well, I had to. Another call was made at 7:27. The time you just guessed you made the call to your wife, except this one was made to a burner phone. A burner phone linked to an OCG nominal with the name Mark, which Ian Malick provided you with during the interview. It was this call that tipped off the OCG about Malick's cooperation, and they then conspired to not only delay the transport, but then ambush it later that evening, I informed him. Michaels began to shake his head. No, I never made that call. That wasn't me, I swear, he persisted. But the thing is, the OCG needed to know when the transport would reach the ambush point and which route they were going to take. As you well know, all our vehicles have GSB trackers on them for safety reasons. All you need to track them is the serial number. Anyone could access those, Michaels countered. Well, you're right, they can. But prior to this interview, we checked the entry logs for the office. Everyone had left the building by 7 p.m. Except your access card was used at 7:43 p.m., I revealed. What on earth's going on? I was at the apartment all night, he yelled in frustration. Well, apart from the call to your wife, of course, I countered. I mean, yeah, but other than that, I swear. He stuttered, tripping over his words. Once again, I let him settle before moving on. Now, please look at this image, I said, sliding over the photo which was obtained by the search team. Michaels glared down at the image, and a horrified look came over his face. That's my phone, Michaels muttered in disbelief. I'm glad you've confirmed that. This phone, which, yes, is registered to you, was found hidden under your wardrobe. The search of the phone yielded a pretty significant find. As you can see, the tracker app was active in the background of your running apps, with the GPS serial number... No! Of Ian Malick's... No! Transport vehicle saved. No, I'm being framed. Look, I didn't do it. Ian Malick got under your skin. He bragged about the sexual exploitation of vulnerable children. You went home angry, you had a drink, you called home from a payphone. Because I couldn't find my phone. If I had my phone, why wouldn't I call my family from it? To cover your tracks and provide a cover story.
When you heard the voice of your kids, you imagined that other boys like them would be exploited by Malik if he was allowed to go free. So in a drunk fit of rage, you took that scrap piece of paper with Mark's number, and you called him, didn't you?
No, Sue, no, I didn't do this. Anthony, come on, you know me. You know I wouldn't do this.
Michaels was crying now, uncontrollably. Martinez could barely look at him. The OCG spun you a pack of lies and told you if you gave them time to set up a trap, they'd be able to take Malik and spare the security team. So, you went to the office, got the GPS details, and told them chapter and verse on the transport. But, well, the OCG don't take chances, and they don't like loose ends. So 2 of our own are now in the morgue. One's burnt to a crisp on a ventilator. Michaels couldn't even deny anymore. He was in too much of a state.
I'm being set up, Sue. Please, believe me,
he whispered through the tears. Well, I wanted to believe him, I really did, but I had a job to do. Special Agent Gerald Michaels, you have failed to provide another plausible account to dispute the findings of the case, and therefore I am charging you with conspiracy to murder a federal witness and malfeasance in office. You will remain here under detention until I can arrange custody for you under a new alias in a federal prison. Interview terminated, 10:15 a.m. As I reached over and stopped the recording, Michaels lunged over the desk and grabbed my wrist.
James, please, man, listen to me. I did not do this. Look into my eyes. I did not do this. Oh, someone set me up. There's someone in the team you can't trust. They're the ones doing this, not me,
he pleaded. There was a genuine and honest tone to his voice. I gently pulled my wrist free and began to leave the room, Martinez in tow. Michael slumped back into his chair and sobbed in his hands. Martinez slumped the back of his shoulders against the corridor wall, and if it wasn't for his legs holding him up, he'd have slid down onto his ass.
Damn, that was hard,
he confessed. I slapped a hand on his shoulder and squeezed it supportively. Yeah, I know, son, I know. But if we had anyone in that room on the same charge, bound to rights, they'd say the same thing. It wasn't me, I was set up. We have to listen to the evidence, and the evidence says he did it.
What's your say, though?
Martinez probed. I hesitated giving an answer. Look, it doesn't matter what my gut says. Chapter 13. The next afternoon, myself and Ruth took a drive out to Jackson County. We needed to speak to Thomas Campbell. If what Michaels was saying was true, then all our assets were in mortal danger. We pulled up outside the coroner's office building. I instructed Ruth to go in alone. She's a criminal psychologist who's worked on multiple cases in the area, not just the roadside and Showtime murders. She wouldn't look out of place if anyone asked or was watching. I pulled the car up. Ruth jumped out and made her way inside. As I waited, I began to mull over the past 48 hours. We found absolutely no evidence that Michaels had any prior contact with anyone linked with any figure from organized crime. The evidence pointed to an over-emotional man, under the influence of alcohol, who made a horrible choice with horrific consequences. Hence the carelessness of disposing of the evidence. It explained why every OCG nominal we had under surveillance dumped their burners, likely tipped off by Mark. Now he knew we had his number and therefore, likely others. Martinez did say he was prone to taking things personal, and maybe this time he just took it too far. But there were, anomalies too. Michael's access card was used for the office shortly after the call to Mark, yet I spoke to the security on duty that night. None of them said they witnessed Michaels entering the building. That's not to say he didn't, but it's becoming hard to believe that they wouldn't notice a drunk man stumbling into the office. But then again, they were busy setting up the transport, so... fuck, I don't know what to think. Not long after, Ruth came out of the building, Campbell in tow. I could tell just by the way they were walking she hadn't told him the real reason that he was being dragged out of his office. He thought he was going to a job, clearly. I saw his expression turn a little puzzled, bordering on concerned, when he saw Ruth getting into the passenger seat.
He hesitated getting in the back, but eventually opened the door and climbed in. His expression didn't get any better when he saw me in the driver's seat. What's going on? He asked, slow and cautious. Put your seatbelt on, Thomas. We're going for a drive, I instructed. He complied, and we drove out of the parking lot. So, what's this all about? I haven't heard anything. I'm not playing you, I swear, he rambled. My squinted eyes and hurried nod told him to calm down. No, it's not that, I assured him. So you've not heard anything? Not had any strange calls, maybe asking you to meet? I quizzed. Campbell stared at us through the rear view mirror, a disturbed look on his face. Is this anything to do with that Ian Malik guy being killed the other night? News was pretty vague about the details. Something about a carjacking gone wrong, but, well, they mentioned he was in charge of the Lawrence home for boys. That's where the boy is from, isn't it? The one who I'm being blackmailed with? He demanded to know. Yep, it is, I sighed. Campbell took a moment to connect the dots, but when he did, he looked petrified. Holy shit, he spoke to you, didn't he? And then they found out. Then they gunned him down and set him on fire while he was alive, he yelled in a panic. How do you know he was burned alive? That was left out of the press, Ruth questioned. Oh, well, I'm a coroner. We do talk, you know, he asked rhetorically with a screwed-up face. Listen, I'm only telling you this because you have a right to know the situation. For your protection. Yes, we pulled in Ian Malik on conspiracy to murder Ryan Thomas in order to blackmail you, amongst other charges, one of which being the exploitation of vulnerable children. Okay, Campbell said, clearly waiting for something he didn't know. One of our guys, he's got kids. Malik was a little, shall we say, brash about it. Okay. Campbell was now on edge. We, arrested him for conspiring to have him killed. Oh my God, I'm out. I'm freaking out. He began to go off on a tangent almost immediately. He even tried the car door, despite the fact that we were moving. Listen, will you just listen? We've dealt with it. The agent who we've arrested just let this evil man get in his head. We offered him immunity, just like you, except, well, Ian Malik wasn't being blackmailed. He was doing everything because he wanted a bigger bank account, I informed him. But then why offer him immunity? Campbell demanded to know, almost channeling Michael's. Because he could give us the people abusing the kids. These aren't just some scummy pedophiles prowling the parks and the shopping malls. These are rich, powerful people who likely have families and positions of power and don't want their relationship with these people or the fact they get off on control and dominance over powerless children coming out, I answered passionately. So this guy, your freaking agent, didn't agree with you, so just handed him over? His panic was back again. Well, essentially yes, but he's been dealt with. We don't know what we told them, but we're guessing it was just about Malik. We don't know how much of what he did spooked them, so we just wanted to make sure no one has been in contact, trying to lure you to a remote location or something. No. Well, if they do, you don't go. You call us, you hear me? Don't do anything they haven't asked you to do before, or that just sounds generally risky. We clear? I demanded confirmation, and Campbell met my intense gaze for a few seconds before nodding silently. Yeah, okay, he assured me frantically. Okay, good, I said, pulling back into the parking lot. And remember, always debug your office before you call us, I reminded him. I will, he affirmed as he jumped out of the car and made his way back into his office, while me and Ruth drove away. The car made its way back to HQ as Ruth was on the phone. Yeah, really? That's great. Yeah, we'll be right there, Ruth exclaimed positively. Good news for a change? I asked sarcastically. Maybe. How's our little side dish, Sarah? She's got the hotspots. She's preparing a presentation back at HQ, she informed me, and I chuckled. She is not my side dish, I argued humorously, and Ruth just smirked.
If you say so.
I do. There's only one woman for me, Miss Maddock, I assured her in my most serious tone. Her smirk turned to a grin, then into an emotion-filled smile.
And there's only one man for me too, Mr. Rodriguez, she assured me back. No other words needed to be said. We knew who we each meant. So, Ruth said, breaking the ice, guess if Campbell's not heard anything suspect, then it was just an isolated incident. I mulled her speculation over. My face showed I wasn't convinced. I worked with Michaels on the swarm. Martinez was right. He didn't like anything involving kids. He used to completely lose his head over it. He even gave a few suspects a black eye during interviews. That's minor in comparison to what he's been accused of. Right now, he's been waiting to be carted off to Leavenworth, a federal agent in a federal prison. I need to know if what he said is true before he's convicted. Conspiracy to murder a federal witness carries a life sentence. I need to be sure. And you aren't?
Ruth pressed. No. As far as I'm concerned, the jury's still out. Campbell's never met any of the OCG nominals. They know there's nothing he could tell us about their operation, bar obviously the blackmail, which they know he won't risk speaking about, in case they use it. They might also need him to doctor more reports so he's more used to them alive. No, we need to see our other assets, I concluded.
Kim?
Ruth asked. Yeah, she knows Nathan, and she can prove the murder of Ryan Thomas was for blackmail purposes. If someone did set up Michaels and this isn't an isolated incident, then she's at serious risk. Ruth simply nodded in concerned agreement. We arrived back at HQ around an hour later. We got coffee and donuts for everyone, so as to give time for Sarah to prep for the presentation. We convened in the meeting room at 1 p.m. and took our seats, as Sarah fired up the screen.
Okay, so I've been preparing a presentation on potential leads that we can investigate. Based on the cell phone triangulation data we got from the burner phone numbers used by Mark and Nathan. We've also had some feedback from surveillance. They ran the images of these two OCG nominals through facial recognition software. We got 2 IDs, she said, clicking the remote and bringing up 2 mugshots of a pair of hardened-looking men, both white, mid to late 30s. The one on the left had a shaved head with salt and pepper stubble coming through as a beard. He was clearly a stocky man. He had cold, dark eyes. The other was a younger man, appearance-wise anyway, but no less sinister looking. He had dark, slick-back hair down the back of his neck that flicked out slightly at the ends. He had intense green eyes and dark, thick sideburns that shaped his chiseled jaw. He had a much more athletic build with an extremely vascular neck. The man on the left is Mark, a.k.a. Mirkov Savic, age 41, born December 1980 in Bucharest, Romania. Moved to live in the United States at the age of 27. Numerous convictions for violence on his resume. Armed robbery in 1999, then ABH in 2004, for which he fled to America to avoid prosecution. Eventually the case was dropped. Since being in America, he was sentenced to 8 years for GBH in 2006. We believe this is when he was recruited by the OCG. He was released in 2016 for an additional 2 years added to his sentence for aggravated assault on a fellow prisoner. Since then, he's been arrested for multiple offenses, namely assault with a deadly weapon, affray, witness tampering, and even attempted murder. He was never convicted of any of these offenses due to lack of evidence, Sarah informed us. More like the OCG made sure no one would testify, Marshall speculated, and the room murmured in agreement. From records in Jefferson County Correctional, it appears Savage carried out an unprovoked attack on another inmate. He attacked another inmate in the dinner hall, and during the assault, he bit the other man's tongue out, she added. What the fuck? We all gasped. Our reports were extremely vague, but there were rumors this other inmate had a habit of trading information on other inmates for perks with the guards. We believe this was Savage's initiation into the OCG, making someone think twice about talking to the guards. So,
He's a nasty piece of work, then? Ruth asked, facetiously. Oh, yes. Any dealings with Mr. Savage or Mark, well, extreme caution needs to be used. He's likely to be armed and incredibly dangerous. Right, so what about the other man? Marshall inquired. This individual's Niall McKinney, a.k.a. Nathan, 36 years of age. Again, not originally from the USA. Born July 1985 in Belfast, Northern Ireland. His father, Padraig, was an IRA soldier who was shot and killed in an ambush by English Marines when Niall was just 2 years old. He was raised by his uncle, Gerard Toit. Sarah's sentence trailed off. It went over everyone's heads, but I knew who that was. Oh, jeez. Former IRA leader, Britain's most wanted man back in the 80s, I informed the group. Everyone was in a state of mild shock over this news. Correct. Toit raised Niall to be a hard man. In 2001, at the age of 16, McKinney joined their rivals, the dissident paramilitary group, the real IRA, much to the dismay of his uncle. Niall climbed the ranks in the organization till he was 31. Significantly, he fled the country to the USA in July 2014, days after the Everglades Hotel in Derry was bombed during a Northern Ireland Police Service conference. Witnesses said the bomb had been left by a man wearing a dark balaclava. I think we can all say we recognize that type of appearance during our investigation. So, is there anything in his files about how he potentially was recruited into the OCG? I quizzed. Sarah pouted and tilted her head as if trying to work it out on the spot. Real IRA have always been a lucrative source of an illegal weapons trade for organized crime groups in the States. McKinney likely used his IRA contacts as a foot in the door with the OCG. He supplies the weapons and his paramilitary insights, and in return they make him a high-ranking figure of their organization, overseeing the prostitution side of things, she speculated. He, Mike Savage, is another person we should consider extremely lethal, and not to be approached without backup or assistance, she added conclusively. Excellent work, Sarah. This is phenomenal. Martinez congratulated Sarah, causing her to blush with shy modesty. Well, if this confirms one thing for me, though, is that the other OCG nominal, Pablo, isn't using his real name either. Pablo, like Nathan, like Mark, is an alias. We've heard from a couple of witnesses that Pablo is an attractive-looking man in his late 20s, very early 30s, Hispanic descent, dark hair, and good teeth, I said. Us Latinos are attractive, Soup. You'll have a task on your hands, Martinez quipped, winking at Sarah. Ruth and Marshall chuckled along, whilst I noticed a smirk from Sarah to Martinez. Well, looks like me and Ruth weren't the only ones with a hidden relationship. Yeah, but this isn't time for jokes, I warned him gently. Yeah, sorry, Soup, he said respectfully. The room settled back down and Ruth seemed to have a brainwave. She held up her hand and I gestured for her to speak. When I was being ambushed on Highway 50 during the investigation into the roadside murders, one of the heavies who was trying to kidnap me, they said something to others like, Pablo said we could have some fun with her, something to that effect. I never thought anything of it at the time because of the situation, but, well, now that I think of it, he's the one who arranged the ambush. Now we just need to establish if Pablo is on a level with Mark and Nathan, or if he's higher up in the organization, Ruth speculated to the group. Well, actually, maybe this could help, Sarah addressed Ruth. Sarah, please continue, I prompted. Thanks, Soup, Sarah said with a friendly nod of respect. She raised her hand and pressed the clicker. A large satellite view of Kansas City and surrounding cities came on the screen. A further click of the remote revealed patterns of red dots appearing in various locations across the map. The red dots represent Nathan. The dots are where he's made calls or texts from on multiple occasions. As you can see, a lot of the dots accumulate around the Overland Park area, where Nathan oversees the sex workers. However, there are other places of interest, she said, clicking the remote once more, and one circle was highlighted in yellow. This is a warehouse on West 31st Street. Now, I've looked into the lease records. The space is rented by a firm called
X1 Solutions, registered in the Cayman Islands. Has been for the past 5 years. The same amount of time Niall McKinney has been in the country. And as we know, the putative figure we know to be the ringleader of this organized crime syndicate, well, he goes by the name Mr. X. I believe this is where the OCS are receiving, storing, and trading illegal weapons coming over from Northern Ireland, Sarah suggested. Look, there are a few other points of interest, notably here, and here, she added, triple-clicking the remote, highlighting more red dots. One of the locations is on Highway 10, just outside Canyon Creek. These findings were from the night of the ambush. We believe Nathan had his own trap set, in case the convoy took that route that night. When Michaels tipped off Mark about the route, Mark's phone called Nathan's, and shortly after, Nathan's burner phone goes offline. So does Mark's. And, what about the other locations? Martinez probed. Well, the other, significantly, is the Aura Kansas City nightclub. The nightclub's a hotspot for Nathan's phone, even for the brief time we had it under surveillance. Before the phone was triangulated at the second ambush site, a few hours later, their phone received an incoming call from an unknown number whilst being in the Overland Park area. The phone then made an outgoing call to the same unknown number, which took place in the vicinity of the nightclub. The next morning, Detective Marshall visits the premises and is told the CCTV of the assault on the missing girl has been deleted. So, are you saying this Nathan deleted it? Marshall asked curiously. Well, officially there's no way of knowing. For all we know, Nathan got the call to tell him to rally some men for the ambush, and he picked them up from the nightclub. The outgoing call may have been to confirm that he's on his way, but it does seem suspect, I must say, Sarah concluded. Well, I think we need to revisit the nightclub and rattle some cages. See what shakes loose, Martinez suggested. Agreed. Sarah, is any news from surveillance about the wiretaps on Ryan and Patrick? Marshall asked, even more curious this time. She looked at the floor before glancing in my direction, causing everyone else to do the same. Yeah, well, we didn't get the warrants. Apparently there's no cause for tapping their phones. The DOJ were actually furious about the intrusive nature of our surveillance on them. Had to report that the surveillance hadn't yielded any notable finds, and they ordered me to pull the surveillance off them. Unless we can prove they're in the receipt of large payments from the OCS, and they're off limits for now. Sorry, guys. I know, it's a huge hit for us. Well, not your fault, Soup. Politics, Marshall consoled, and everyone murmured in unison. Yeah, don't worry, we'll get them, Martinez assured in agreement. Yeah, I know. Sarah, please continue. Actually, as one door closes, another opens. Please look at this next marker. She raised the remote and clicked it once more. A red dot marked on the map in a remote area on the other side of the river was highlighted. This is another warehouse. It's a part of a complex in Armadale, and all the lots are leased out to businesses who want to use the premises for storage of goods and fleet. Every business who's currently renting one of the units are registered firms in the USA, and all legit firms. No mention of X1 Solutions as a renter of one of the units. However, there is one of the units that's free, unrented and completely empty. Has been for nearly 15 years. Wow, that certainly is strange, Ruth surmised. It is, yeah. Not only that, but with clear traffic, it's a 12-minute drive from Union Hills. Read the transcript from Ian Malick's interview. He revealed that during his meeting with Mr. X, he was abducted from his home, blindfolded, and driven to a warehouse, where he spoke with him over an encrypted web chat. Now, the interview transcript reads, "Don't know. Very cloak and dagger, though. Got picked up one night, bag thrown over my head, and driven to some warehouse somewhere, around 15 minutes from my apartment. Now, it's extremely likely this warehouse, given how long it's been kept free, is the same warehouse the high-ranking members of the OCS contact Mr. X because, well, if we look at this too." Sarah then pressed the remote again, and a pattern of more dots appeared, and this time they were blue. Well, these blue dots, they represent activity hotspots on Mark's burner phone. Predictably,
We have a marker at the ambush site, as expected. But the burner phone was also active at the warehouse in Armadale around 24 hours before the ambush. The triangulation data shows Nathan and Mark were there at the same time. About what, we don't know. But this clearly shows the warehouse is a significant location to investigate in regards to our inquiry.
Whoa. Excellent stuff, Sarah. I applauded.
I've not even gotten the best part yet, Sarah revealed, holding back a giddy fit. Our faces all dropped as we all leant forward in anticipation. Ian Malik stated in his interview that the visitor logs had deleted after a week, after the soup requested the 13-year history. But he never said that the last week didn't have a visitor on it. I kept calling the home after the ambush took place, till a female member of staff answered. Malik only ever said that he worked male OCG nominals into the rotas, so I knew she wasn't corrupt. I told her I needed the visitor log as part of the Malik murder investigation. Well, she sent me the log. I noticed a Mr. Smith visited the home at 2 p.m. on the 13th of May. Mark's number came online that day. We've identified a pattern of calls. Now, Malik said that when the visitors attend the home, they're dropped off by Mark. They go in, stay, then Malik calls Mark and he takes them away. She clicked the remote and highlighted a blue dot that was in the center of Lawrence on the map. This is the call Ian Malik makes to Mark, informing him the visit is over. Mark then travels to the home and collects the visitor. Then, an hour later, Mark makes a call to an unknown number which triangulated in the Union Hills area. What this call was about, we don't know, but it was the same number that called Nathan and Mark on the night of the ambush. Not only do I think this number is either Pablo or another high-ranking OCG member, but the call Mark made triangulated outside the Blue Hills Country Club in Leawood. One or more of the Lawrence home abusers, and perhaps the corrupt public officials who are assisting them, are likely to be members there, she summarized, pressing her hands together tightly in excited anticipation.
Oh, you little beauty,
I exclaimed, leaping to my feet and high-fiving her, and the rest of the team followed suit.
God, she's only gone and put it out the fire, hasn't she?
Marshall yelled at the group, with his arm around young Sarah.
Well, I've already requested historic triangulation data on the number. Should have that back in a couple of days, she added proudly. And the group came together to congratulate her in awe of her hard work. So, what's the plan then, Soup? Get some backup and raid the gun warehouse? Surely someone there'll talk, Martinez proposed. Sarah and Marshall both agreed and looked to me for approval, but I could see Ruth was troubled. I don't actually think that's a good idea, she stated. Everyone turned to face her then. When I was attacked that day on Highway 50, I managed to get away, and one of the men who tried to abduct me got left behind, as the rest fled the scene. Just before they grabbed me, I made a call to James, telling him where I was, so they knew the authorities would be on their way to the scene. This man, he was injured, so he couldn't flee the vicinity. He knew he'd be taken into the police and potentially forced to talk. I watched this guy pull a gun from his waist and shoot himself in the head. We could raid that warehouse, arrest a load of low-level thugs who will all just say nothing, and then we alert the OCG that we're onto their gun trade, Ruth concluded. I agree. We're forgetting our brief. Our brief is to identify, not prosecute, high-level links between organized crime and corrupt public officials, not to raid OCG strongholds. Our main targets are the abusers of Lawrence, the people who ordered the murders of Juliet Knight, Jessica Price, and Maggie Dana, or potentially others, and the corrupt officials in KCPD and the surrounding political offices. Our secondary objective is gathering evidence of the OCG's network in order to secure a RICO case. No, our best move right now is to keep surveillance on the country club. Watch to see who gets in Mark's car and move in on them. I guarantee a rich, wealthy politician in the public eye will do anything to keep his dirty secret from coming out, I suggested. Sounds good. I'll get on to surveillance, Sarah said. Sarah, I'll deal with surveillance. I'm going to pull the guys off Kim and redirect them to the country club.
Think that's wise, Soup? Martinez asked. No, I think that's a good idea for now. She's already given us Nathan. She'll call us when he gets a new burner. We can continue tracking his cell. It's clear the OCG simply offer protection to the sex workers and don't actually run them. In return, they harvest DNA for them occasionally and throw them a percentage. Their real trafficking operations lie in the boys' home and the grooming parties. Having surveillance watching her just puts her more at risk, now the OCG know the feds are watching, Marshall said in agreement. Alright, I'll get on it right away. Someone needs to go down there and let her know she won't be being watched anymore, so be careful. And to contact us if she's instructed to harvest any client's DNA. Alright, I'll go, Soup, Martinez offered. Marshall shook his head firmly. No, I'll go. Look, she's spoken to me and she trusts me, he asserted. Okay, fine. Me and Ruth have something we need to do tomorrow. Marshall, you speak to Kim. Sarah and Martinez, you two find out everything you can about that unknown number and the case of the missing girl who Ryan and Patrick are searching for. Everyone back to HQ in 44 hours. Good work today, everyone. Especially Sarah. Right, now go home and rest up. Oh yeah, everyone yelled. Everyone apart from Ruth, of course. Everyone left the office and went their separate ways, except for me and Ruth. We climbed into my car and drove out into the city. Ruth was quiet for the first few minutes of the journey, until she turned to me and said, So, what's this thing we have to do? I sighed and shook my head as I stared forward. Well, just before the meeting, I got a call from Leavenworth. There's been an accident. We're going to see Michaels. Chapter 14. We waited in the interview booth. Ruth was extremely quiet as we sat in a room, separated from another by a desk and a bulletproof glass window. I looked at her. The last time she was in a room like this, Robert Cassidy sat on the other side of the glass. The person next to her was brutally murdered a few weeks later. I didn't patronize her. I just let her process her own feelings as we waited for the prison staff to fetch Michaels. The awkward silence was broken by the sound of a buzzing tone and a lock snapping. A door in the corner of the other room opened and 2 prison guards walked in, escorting a man into the room. We watched as the guards released their grip on the prisoner, and he slumped down. They left the room and locked the door behind them. The prisoner hobbled over to the desk, and he even struggled to pull out the chair in order to take his seat. However, once he did, he took a few minutes for the pain to settle, and he raised his head to face us. Special Agent Michaels had been beaten to a pulp. It looked like his arm, which was in a sling, had been broken, or at the very least badly sprained. He also walked with a limp, and the way he struggled to do the slightest of tasks suggested severe injuries to his midsection. Jesus, what happened to you? Ruth asked, shocked and concerned. No matter what he'd been accused of doing, well, he was still a human being, and he hadn't actually been convicted yet. I fell down some stairs, he managed to say, wincing and wheezing. God, how many steps were there? Ruth asked, incredulously. 5 of them. 5 big steps, he said deliberately, and it was obvious that steps meant attackers. So, why have you requested our presence here today, Jerry? I asked, getting straight to the point. I'm vulnerable in here, Soup. Sharing a cell with people who know I'm a federal agent. Do you know what that's like in here? I'd like to request a private cell. I keep asking the guards that they just ignore me. I know the OCG we're investigating have men in this prison, in the cells and on the payroll. Please, you have to help me, he pleaded. We'll just put in a vulnerable prisoner request form to the warden, I countered. I've tried, but they said it could take up to 10 working days to process. Oh, look at me. This is after 1 day. And all I said was that... he exclaimed, before hesitating. He lowered his shoulders and looked around for anyone who might be listening to the interview via potential microphones. Someone on the task force framed me. I didn't talk to the OCG. I didn't arrange the murder of Ian Malik. And whoever framed me is the same person who arranged those men to beat the living piss out of me. It was a warning to keep my mouth shut. One of the men who attacked me, they told me that when I'm in front of a judge in 9 days, to plead guilty. Otherwise, the next time they'll turn me into a vegetable. He whispered to us in fear. Ruth and I looked at each other, both trying to gauge if we believed him. Soup. James, please. You have to speak to the warden. Pull some strings and get me moved to a private cell. That way I can stay safe until you find the real mole on your team. Well, his pleas were begging for his life. I looked at the man I'd known since our departments collaborated to bring down the swarm, nearly 10 years ago, and saw the desperate fear in his eyes. Okay. We'll speak to the warden, and I'll make sure you're on the VP wing by the end of the day, I assured him. Didn't matter whether he was guilty or not. He was at immediate risk, and I owed him this at least. Thank you. He began to sob. This was clearly hard on him. Right. Stay safe, Jerry, I said, as me and Ruth rose to our feet. The guards buzzed each of the doors to the rooms, and a pair of guards came in to collect us. Just before Michaels was pulled to his feet, he looked us both right in the eye and whispered, No, you stay safe. They're still among you. Well, me and Ruth watched as he was escorted, grunting and wincing in pain, out of the room, and the door closed behind them. We shared a concerned look and made our way out of the prison. Ruth waited in the car for me whilst I spoke to the warden. I came out of the building around 30 minutes later and climbed into the vehicle. What did he say then? Said he'll be in a VP cell within the hour. Pulled in every favor I have, I informed her in an exhausted manner. Are you okay? Ruth asked, concerned. Yeah, it's just, seeing him like that, and the things he said. Oh, Ruth, I've been in enough interviews to know when some desperate prisoner's begging for perks, and when someone's telling the truth. So, you're starting to believe we actually have a mole? She asked, incredulously. Oh, I always have done, Ruth. First, I just questioned whether I was being biased based on the fact I know Jerry, but, after Sarah talked about that third burner phone the night of Malik's murder, I'm starting to think that's more than likely the person who set up the ambush. Everyone heard the tape. They know Michaels was upset, giving him the perfect motive. Not only do they murder our best witness, but they take out one of the most dogged investigators with it, I concluded. So what are we going to do about it? Ruth asked, curiously. I looked at her. I hated this situation and what it was making me feel. The paranoia, the niggling doubts. Wondering, can I trust you, Ruth? Can I trust the person that I've fallen in love with? I looked into her ocean-like eyes and searched for any hint of deceit. I was never going to find any, though. James, Ruth prompted, wondering why I'd gone quiet. The warrants were approved. Wiretaps go live at 3 p.m., I revealed. Oh, on Ryan and Patrick? Yeah, I kept it to myself. The warrant's only for 10 days. If we do have a mole, they contact them, tell them to shut up and sit tight, and we'd never get anything. I could tell Ruth was processing what I'd said, and I could also tell she was hurt. Why didn't you tell me what you were doing? She asked, with an edge to her tone. I just thought I might be the mole, she asked, furious. No, these people try to have me kidnapped, likely raped and killed, or worse, sold to some sex ring in Armenia. And you thought there was a chance that I was working for them? Well, she was yelling now. I know. I'm sorry, I'm just so tired of second-guessing everything. I should have told you straight away, because I do trust you, Ruth. I do, I assured her, genuinely. She just stared at me, analyzing my exhaustion, my paranoia, and emotions. Her expression relaxed, and she pulled my face close to hers and kissed my forehead. "It's fine. You told me now. I guess we're just both a little wound up," she admitted. "Oh, it's no excuse," I said, self-pitying. "No, it is. Look, I must admit I can't look at anyone the same, wondering if they're plotting against us. Ever since you told me you didn't trust Marshall, I argued at first, but, well, I can't lie. I've watched what I say around him recently." Ruth confided this in me, and I mulled over what she said with an extremely thoughtful look on my face. Then I fired up the car engine. "Where are we going?" Ruth inquired. "The Aura nightclub." Around an hour later, we were pulling up on Main Street, watching the club from 100 yards away down the road. A large man was on the door, 6'3", a pale, hard face on his chiseled, trapezium-shaped head. His short black sleeves almost tearing as his tattooed arms bulged underneath the fabric. "You think he's OCG?" Ruth asked. I pulled up my phone and sifted through my emails until I found one from Sarah. I opened it and waded through it for the information I needed. "Oh, Sarah, that little machine, eh? She compiled a list on employees from all the places of interest. Right, here we go. Aura nightclub. Let's see," I said, scrolling down until I came across a familiar face. "There, Dennis Gordon. That's him," I said, showing Ruth the profile image. She agreed. I then read what information we had on him. 34 years old. Released from Jefferson 6 months ago and serving 2 years for aggravated assault. Prior to that, he's spent a combined 8 years in prison for varying convictions of violence. However, it was only his last conviction that he spent in the state of Missouri. Guy's from Memphis originally. He's small fry, but he's clearly a handyman. Wouldn't have been hard for him to convince the OCG to give him a security job for when he was released. There was a man like him at my ambush. If I didn't witness Danmo blow his head off with a rifle, I'd swear that was him. You stay here, I'll go. I know how to play it. You'll stick out like a sore thumb in your federal suit," Ruth asserted, looking at me up and down. "Oh, Ruth, I can't let you go alone. It could be dangerous, and besides, you're only a trainee agent. It's against protocol. No, I'm coming too," I demanded, unbuckling my seatbelt. Ruth pressed her hand on my shoulder, though, gesturing for me to stay where I am. "It's fine. I can handle it. Look, we're not actually here on official business, so protocols don't count, do they?" she pointed out with a smirk. I mulled over what she was saying and concluded there was no arguing with her. Fine. But even a hint of danger and I'll get my ass out of there," she assured me with a confident grin. She took her blazer off and pulled the bobble from her hair, letting the red locks drop and flow down her smooth, arched back. It was like everything she did was designed to give men a cardiac arrest. She pulled out some lipstick and touched up her makeup. And I can't lie, though, my eyes widened when she took off her gun holster and left it on the dash. "Oh, what are you doing?" I asked incredulously. "Just trust me, James," she requested. Well, I was reluctant, but eventually I caved. She jumped out of the vehicle, crossed the street, and made her way to the door. I felt like I was on hot pins as I watched her begin talking to the doorman. I could tell she wasn't addressing him as a member of law enforcement. She was portraying herself as a punter. She was elevating her right hip and playing with her hair in a flirtatious manner. The way her body curved, propped up on her 6-inch heels, Dennis Gordon never stood a chance. He smiled at her, causing my blood to boil with envy. I cursed myself for being so insecure. However, I lightened up when he let her through. 15 minutes passed. It felt like 15 hours, though, to be honest, but Ruth eventually came out. She came out of the bar and began to chat to Gordon once more. God, what was she doing? I don't know whether I was worried because she was taking unnecessary risks, or if I was fuming with jealousy because she was clearly flirting with him. Gordon pulled his phone out and began to type away, while Ruth took hers out too. A few more exchanges occurred before she walked up to him and their faces got awfully close. He went for her mouth, but she swerved playfully and kissed his cheek. She gave him a wink and said something to him, to which he replied with a huge grin on his face. She left the scene, swinging her hips, making him drool like a Doberman as she walked away.
What on earth was that all about?
I demanded to know, letting my personal feelings boil to the surface. But my anger was cut short when I could practically see Ruth's skin crawling.
That was for this,
she said, showing me her phone. It was Gordon's number.
Oh, the file you showed me. It showed he had a partner.
I knew if I lured him in with a potential sexual encounter, he'd likely give me his burner number to be discreet. It's mainly to keep up the pretense, but I thought if I got the number, then we have something else to look into.
It might not lead anywhere, but
better to have it than not, eh? Well, I scoffed at how brilliant she was at this. She could read people and predict their behavior to a T. You're amazing, you know that? And you certainly know how to give a man on his toes, I confessed. Ruth pursed her lips and raised her eyebrows, whilst leaning back slightly.
James Rodriguez, did you get a little jealous?
Oh, Ruth, look at you. I'm only human, so yes, whether it was just acting or not, I told her honestly. Ruth, she didn't tease or make fun, she just, smiled at me. She leant in and we kissed and embraced. I wanted to tell her right there and then that I loved her, but when I did it, I was going to do it right, not on the job, when this was done and we were living our own lives.
I do have something to report, though. It's going to spoil this moment,
she confessed. My heart began to beat just a little bit faster. What now?
Once I was in there, I asked around and got to speak to the manager. Told him I was interested in the CCTV from the 19th of April. They told me they delete it after every 30-day period, unless the police sequester the footage. I asked them if the cameras or footage had any malfunctions or glitches. They told me that, to the best of their knowledge, there wasn't any problems, and they told this to the detective who asked the other day, she revealed.
I simply put my hand over my mouth in shock and began to massage my face as I processed what Ruth was telling me.
I asked her what else this detective said.
He told me the detective came in and they watched the footage from that day.
However, they said there wasn't anything of relevance to the investigation and gave us permission to delete it.
Maybe this was Detective Ryan, though, I asked, praying it was.
No. I asked them what this detective looked like, and they accurately described Marshall. Plus, they said it was 2 days ago when he came in. We had Detective Ryan under surveillance then. He went nowhere near the bar,
Ruth said, a disturbed look on her face.
So, what's wrong? I don't want to admit it, but I think you were right. I don't think we can trust him.
Chapter 15. The phone vibrated on the bedside cabinet, waking me in a daze. Ruth began to stir too.
Oh, what time is it? Who's that?
She murmured. I picked up the phone and saw it was Martinez. I looked across at the clock and saw it was 2:47 a.m. Oh, any calls after 1 a.m. were never good. I composed myself, completely forgetting about what we'd learned about Marshall that day, and answered the phone to him.
Rodriguez, I greeted. Soup? Something's happened,
Martinez said somberly. What do you mean something's happened? I asked, as I was shaking Ruth and getting dressed.
Hey, 2 bodies have been found in Union Hill, James. Better get yourself down here,
Martinez advised. I looked at Ruth, and she could see the disturbed look on my face, and hers now matched. We'll be right there, I assured him, and hung up. Union Hill has 2 sides to it, as did most places, I guess. But there was the nice, quiet suburban area. Nice house, pools, good families. And then there was the more working-class area. Low-rent apartments, dark alleys, and shady characters. The apartment block on McGee Street was surrounded by flashing lights. Ambulances, KCPD, and our little friend, Thomas Campbell, the Jackson County coroner. Our investigation being as covert as it is, meant everyone but Marshall had to stay away from the scene. Given the nature of who we may be investigating, we had to keep a distance. Marshall, however, has no ties to the FBI or Kansas City, so he was free to be our boots on the ground. We all sat in the car and watched the apartments through the tinted windows. Marshall sat in the driver's seat of his SUV, I in the passenger seat, meanwhile Ruth sat in the back, along with Sarah and Martinez. They'd been also woken up in the night. They arrived after me and Ruth, so they'd also arrived together, a fact that wasn't lost on me. "So, what's happened?" I asked. "Well, I'd had an argument with the wife, so went to do some work at HQ, go over some of our evidence, see if there's anything we missed, when, something came up on the box." For the uninitiated, the box was an internal news portal for the police department, almost like Twitter, but for criminal activities. Any important information from within the KCPD, such as reported crimes, APBs, or discovered bodies, came up on the box, and we had access to it. I saw that 2 female bodies had been discovered in an apartment in Union Hills. It didn't register at first as significant, but then I remembered that's where the grooming parties take place, so I came down here and spoke to the authorities. I saw the bodies. Guys, I recognized them both, Marshall said intensely, and we all looked at him with anticipation. One Sandy Marsh, the Misper from the Oran nightclub, and the other... Marshall hung his head in dismay. We were all wide-eyed on the edge of our seats. "It's Kim. The other girl is Kim," Marshall revealed, breathless. We all looked at each other in horror. Ruth and I shared a concerned look. "Did you not speak to her tonight?" I asked curiously. Marshall shook his head. "No. I went to OVP around 6 p.m. looking for her. But the other girls who were working said they hadn't seen her all afternoon. I just assumed she was working somewhere else and I left," Marshall explained. I sighed heavily. "Do you know what happened to them?" Sarah questioned. "Well, I don't have anything official, but the ranking officer at the scene, Captain Mark Xavier, was convinced it was a double opiate overdose. Due to the presence of used needles at the scene, that is." Marshall took a moment to reflect on it. Well, he was pretty adamant about it, actually, without even seeing the scene. I did think that was strange, though. Well, any cop above detective is more politician than they are police. They want crime solved quickly, so they keep the stats up to protect their bonuses, Martinez stated, shaking his head. "Well, yeah, maybe," Marshall muttered, unconvinced. "Do you think the OCG found out Kim was talking to us? Strange how she winds up dead just a few hours after we pull off the surveillance on her," Sarah pointed out. She was addressing the elephant in the room. Until she said it, the thought hadn't even crossed my mind that I was in some way responsible, but it was me, after all, who diverted the surveillance. Had I signed this woman's death warrant? All just to serve our investigation? I then pushed my personal feelings and guilt deep down inside me, and I was again who everyone needed me to be. The boss. Well, if there's one positive to come out of this, we have Campbell on side now. There's plenty of circumstantial evidence to suggest that Sandy Marsh was another victim of the OCG's forced prostitution racket, and likely groomed and forced into having sex with men with significant power and wealth. It's highly likely she's been murdered, and they're making it look like an overdose. The coroner will be able to report if foul play is suspected, but given that they have him on the payroll, that won't happen. However, if there is any DNA in that girl, then he'll be able to harvest it, so I say right now,
There's nothing we can do here. So we go home, get some rest, and we figure out how to play this tomorrow back at HQ, I suggested. I could tell everyone was a little taken aback by how cold I was being, but nevertheless, they knew I was right. Marshall, before you leave, pull Campbell to one side and remind him who he needs to contact first when he's done that autopsy, I instructed. Yes, Soup, he affirmed. Right. I'll see you all at 11 a.m., I commanded. We all dispersed back to the vehicles we came in and left. The drive back to the motel was quiet. Awkward, you might even say. I just stared blankly out of the windscreen as we drove through the dark streets of downtown KC. Ruth looked over at me, assessing my demeanor. What are you thinking, James? She wondered. Did I just unknowingly facilitate a murder, Ruth? I asked her. It wasn't rhetorical. I was genuinely asking. James, you don't make people do anything. They make those decisions because they're evil and greedy and want to make sure they can eat their cake and have it too. If Kim was for the chop, then they would have found a way to do it before she talked. Surveillance or not, you're not to blame, she assured me. Oh, sometimes it's hard to think like that, though. May as well have just hung up a sign that said, "Witness free to murder," I said pitifully. Ruth's face contorted as she was trying to find the right words. James, I think wallowing in this misplaced guilt, you fail to see the true problem here, she said, easing into it. What? I asked. But as I did, it dawned on me before she'd even said it. Surveillance was covert. The OCG would have only known they weren't there if someone tipped them off. If someone tipped them off, it had been pulled. Martinez and Sarah were clearly together tonight, as were me and you. Marshall's the only person who was alone, apparently at the office working, when he finds out about this double overdose on the box. The same Marshall who the nightclub manager says deleted the key CCTV footage in the case of the missing girl that just turned up dead. Well, Michaels was right. He was framed. And now we know who by. The next day, the team gathered in the meeting room. I was tired, as was Ruth. When we got back to the hotel, sleep was the last thing on our minds. And no, not because of that, but because of the murder of Kim, aka Sasha Obayemi, clearly signifying that Michaels was telling the truth all along. Well, he was at least telling us half a truth. Well, he still potentially tipped off the OCG due to his personal feelings about Ian Malik. That was still a possibility. But when he was yelling at us that we had a mole in the task force, it was seeming though he was at least right about that. Again, we didn't know if that was just him casting aspersions, trying to convince us he was innocent, or he was convinced because he was in fact framed. But, well, when coupled with the fact that the OCG knew the surveillance had been pulled, and we had a witness claim Detective Marshall scrapped the CCTV, potentially revealing the identity of Pablo, or another OCG nominal involved in the recruitment and grooming of young girls in the Kansas City area, then you have a lot of reasons to doubt the validity of Jerry Michaels' incarceration. We checked the HQ log in the records for last night. They corroborated Marshall's story of him being at the office, trying to put some things together on the OCG. However, his login time was 11:48 p.m. Hardly gives him a watertight alibi for the potential abduction and murder of Kim. We'd spent the night going through everything, finding a way to put this investigation back on course, and we thought we had it. We couldn't arrest or convict Marshall until we had some solid evidence on him. I contacted my best surveillance agent and asked them to watch Marshall. The information we're about to share with the group, if he was corrupt, then he would definitely make a move. Right, guys. Hope you're all good. I know last night was disruptive, and I appreciate you've all had a lack of sleep, but we have a job to do. And I think we have our next step, I began, the team leaning in. Last night, 2 girls were found dead in apartment 12, 3004 McGee Street, Union Hill. Sasha Kim Obayemi,
a sex worker who had been recruited by us as an asset, along with Sandy Marsh, a girl who'd been missing for the past 26 days, assumed to have been groomed by the OCG, similar to Juliet Knight, Maggie Donner, and Jessica Price. Having access to the KCPD police reports, the initial investigation yielded the following findings. A call was made at 12:32 a.m. by the owner of the apartment, Harry Mason, to emergency services, who said, and I quote the call transcript here, "My friends have taken something and now they've fallen down and they won't get up. Please help." Henry is a 29-year-old male with moderate learning difficulties. He's lived in the apartment since he was 18 and released from the care of his foster parents. Having looked into his history, Henry has multiple noise complaints for throwing parties on almost a weekly basis. However, the state has yet to evict him. Either they're lenient due to his disabilities, or someone is using their influence to keep him in that flat. Lead investigator on site was Detective Marcus Ford. However, the ranking officer at the scene was the KCPD police captain, Mike Xavier. After reading Detective Marshall's statement from last night, he stated that both Ford and Xavier were keen to write the crime off as a double overdose without even waiting to see the post-mortem results first. Well, this, by itself, isn't too suspect. We all know how some captains, superintendents, and chiefs all put their figures before justice. It's an unfortunate truth, and Xavier, who was lead investigator for Vice Squad for over 15 years, personally promoted Ford to be his successor after his promotion to lieutenant in 2010. So Ford, knowing where his bread is buttered, is likely to do anything to keep a smile on the captain's face, right? But unfortunately, I think the explanation is much, much darker. Now, as you're aware, the Blue Hills Country Club is a huge location of interest to our inquiry. Sarah, having tracked Mirkov Savage's burner number to the club, shortly after a VIP attended the Lawrence Home for Boys, after a sexual assault was arranged and facilitated by Ian Malik on the 13th of May, prior to his arrest and murder on the 17th. Well, now we went through the members list of the club, and amongst plenty of senators, CEOs, a couple of judges, various politicians, and other influential members of the upper class, well, one member of the club caught our eye. Captain Mike Xavier. Now, during mine and Ruth's assistance on the roadside murders earlier this year, on the 7th of March, one of the victims, Bethany Matthews, wrote the word pig in her own blood shortly before she lost consciousness. Now, at the time, we believed this to be a clue that the murderer was in fact a police officer. This clue actually turned out to be a clue towards the identity of Thomas Danmore, but given how some of the crimes originally tied to Danmore turned out to be committed by the criminal enterprise that some members of the KCPD are protecting, well, anyone with knowledge of this clue had to be silenced. On the 10th of March, the body of Daniel Stevenson was found hanged just outside Independence, Missouri. Coroner ruled the death a suicide, but as we know now, Thomas Campbell was being blackmailed into falsifying autopsy reports. Campbell confirmed the body had minor defense wounds and showed signs that he'd been unconscious prior to his hanging. He was murdered. Given Bethany Matthews was a confirmed victim of Danmore and Detective Hansen, the first known blackmail victim of the OCG would have known this. It's safe to say the order likely came from someone else in the police department, who wasn't actively manipulating the inquiry but was aware that it was being done. If Stevenson had a concern that a police officer was involved in the murders of some of the roadside victims, he would have reported that to the one person above him, Captain Xavier. On the 13th of March, Thomas Danmore confided to us, in his interview after being arrested, about the abuse he and the other boys were being subjected to at Lawrence. Shortly after this interview, which was taped and recorded and available to be seen by anyone in the station, Danmore and Hansen were both abducted by a group of men, masquerading as their prison transport. They were both found murdered later that day. For a long time we assumed that was to stop Hansen from making a deal to escape prison. However, it seems more likely now that someone didn't want what he knew about child sexual exploitation to come out. And I'm sure I don't need to point out to everyone that he's the only person on the KCPD to have a last name beginning with the letter X. Everyone turned to look at the OCG hierarchy chart on the east side of the wall, looking at the ominous top figure of the chart labeled Mr. X. So, we dig deep, find out everything we can about Mike Xavier, go through the rest of the Blue Hills Country Club members list and confer with surveillance. Try to find out if any other members are being picked up by Savage and transported to Lawrence. In the meantime, we wait for Thomas Campbell to get in touch. He's examining the bodies of Kim and Sandy right now. Soon we'll know how they died, and if what we believe about Sandy and her being groomed into prostitution, well, if it's true, then the DNA could show who wanted her dead. I couldn't help but look over at Detective Marshall, who admittedly looked seriously on edge about what we were talking about. Sarah, you and Martinez get set up in the other office. I want a full comprehensive profile on Captain Xavier by the end of the day, I instructed. Both of them stood up and put their files together. You get set up, Sarah. I'm just going to use the bathroom, Martinez said, desperately hurrying out of the room with his legs crossed. We all giggled about how ridiculous he looked, and he chuckled back in good faith. Sarah followed him out, leaving just myself, Ruth, and Marshall. Me and Ruth are going to continue looking into the country club, trying to find other potential OCG contacts, I stated. Marshall, looking a little anxious over his isolation, glared at me. And me, Soup? He asked. I've, got a special job for you, actually, I revealed with a grin. Go on then, let's hear it. With the surveillance on Detective Ryan and Officer Patrick no longer on, I want someone to go press them, rattle their cages. Tell them you're from out of town working on a case linked to the death of Sandy Marsh. See how they react. What they say, who knows, may give us something to work on. Yeah, sure, Soup, he agreed, almost hesitantly. That okay with you? I checked. Yeah, I just thought with them not being tapped or under surveillance, what good will it do? He quizzed. Well, it's your job to try and get us something to change that. Do what you can, Detective, yeah? Yeah, okay. I'll go now, he said, a little more confidently this time. He raised from his chair and left the office. Ruth eyed me curiously, and when she knew Marshall was out of earshot, she leaned in towards me. What's your game here? I thought you said we needed to keep an eye on him. In fact, the plan was to get him alone and ask him about the CCTV at the nightclub. Look, all we have right now, Ruth, is speculation. It's just suspicion and circumstantial evidence. If he's embedded in a group of hardened criminals, then I guarantee that he'll say nothing and deny everything, and not only will he know we're onto him, but we won't be able to do anything about it. No, this is the right play, I said, self-assured. Ruth took a moment to join the dots. I see. So you think he's going to go to Ryan and Patrick, unaware they were wired, and potentially speak to them about OCG business? She ventured. Well, yeah. Or he doesn't go there and goes to visit another OCG member, unaware he's under surveillance too. At the very least, if we're wrong, then he lights a fire between Ryan and Patrick and they say something incriminating on the wire, I said, optimistically. Ruth nodded with a satisfied expression. You're right. That is a smart play. Well, I have my moments, I stated with a wink. A couple of hours or so passed when my cell phone rang, cutting mine and Ruth's brainstorming session short. I looked down at the caller ID and saw it was Thomas Campbell, calling from his burner phone. My face lit up. This was the call we'd been waiting for. It's Campbell, I informed Ruth with a giddy smile. Well, answer it then, Ruth demanded with excitement. I composed myself and accepted the call. Yeah, I said, purposefully not using my name in case it wasn't Campbell on the other end. Special Agent Rodriguez? It's Thomas Campbell, the voice said, and it was undeniably him. His voice was pretty distinct. But I didn't take any chances. I remained quiet. It's fine, honestly. Did what you said. Checked the office for bugs. Found one.
so I've come to a remote location like you said. You need to come meet me immediately. Bring me somewhere safe. You're not gonna believe what I found on those bodies," he exclaimed incredulously. Well, I looked up at Ruth. My expression told her this was big. The moment was cut short, though, when Marshall re-entered the room. Ruth and I both looked at him, as if we were two kids just caught with our hand in the cookie jar. Yeah, sure. Just text me where you are," I said, trying to blend the tone of the call. "Okay," Campbell replied. "See you soon." And he ended the call. Who was that?" Marshall asked curiously. I must admit the question caught me off guard, but Ruth had it covered. The surveillance on the country club. They've had some issues with some parking official. They need someone with authority to come down and get them to sign an NDA, she explained. "Oh, okay. Want me to come with?" Marshall offered. "No, it's fine. Less bodies the better, I think, eh?" I said, grabbing my coat and hurrying out of my seat. "I'll be back soon," I assured them. Marshall gave me a nod and a half smile. He turned away from me to go over to pour himself a coffee. I looked at Ruth. I pointed my eyes and then pointed at Marshall as his back was turned, silently instructing her to keep a close eye on him. I then rushed down the hall into the garage and climbed into my vehicle. The text came through just as I fired up the engine. I put the address into the GPS and it wasn't far from his office. I set off and drove to the destination. I pulled into the multi-story parking lot 10 minutes later. The text said he'd be on the bottom floor in the far east corner of the building. As I pulled the vehicle into a parking space and began to walk where Thomas said he'd be, I chuckled, thinking this guy had seen one too many spy films. However, as I stood in the middle of this empty building, I noticed the alarming lack of cars and people, and yet despite the clear field of vision, I couldn't see Thomas Campbell anywhere. I pulled out my phone to call him. No signal. I started to walk around, looking for a single bar. Something in my gut told me something was wrong. I couldn't explain it, so I started to quickly make the 100-yard jog back to my car. About halfway to my vehicle, I got a bar. But I didn't dare call Campbell. I called Ruth. The phone rang for a few seconds, with the dialing continually disrupted by the lack of service, but eventually she picked up, and by this point I was just about 10 yards from my car. "James, you... Whatever she was saying came in stutters. "Ruth, something's wrong. Campbell's a no-show and I was cut off by the sound of tires screeching. A black Transit came flying down the ramp and pulled up sharply next to me. "James, I heard Ruth yelling through the receiver, but the signal gave way and the call ended. The van door slid open and two huge men, brandishing baseball bats and donning dark clothing and balaclavas, jumped out. Before I knew it, they were on me. I tried to reach for my firearm, but I wasn't quick enough and the bat slammed into the side of my temple. I don't remember much, just the feeling of my knees scraping against the concrete and the harsh impact of my body crashing against the floor of the van. The door slid closed, and as the vehicle sped away, I blacked out. I wasn't entirely sure how long I'd been out, but when I opened my eyes, everything was blurry. I wasn't seeing double, I was seeing quadruple. Instinctually, I tried to move. The adrenaline surge from realizing that I couldn't brought me round and my vision began to clear. My brain began to assess my very dire situation, step by step. I was in some sort of empty warehouse. I was also seated. Looking down, my feet were cable tied to the front two legs of the chair. My hands were raised to around shoulder height. They were being raised due to both my wrists being clamped to two desks that flanked the chair. Couldn't even feel my hands anymore. They were blue from how tight my wrists were clamped to the wood. I looked up and forward. To a slight right, around 20 yards away, Thomas Campbell was stood, looking at me.
His hands were clasped together tightly, and he was nibbling the skin off his knuckles. He looked extremely anxious, and his eyes were screaming apologies at me. I'm so sorry, he babbled at me. I stared at him wide-eyed, wondering what the hell he'd done. That's when I looked to my left. 5 men of various sizes and builds, all in balaclavas, 3 of which stood menacingly staring at me. The other 2 were carrying in another desk. They placed it in front of me, around 10 yards away. They then fetched a laptop and placed it on the desk, the screen facing away from me. One of the thugs plugged in a dongle and began typing away for a few minutes, until they seemingly looked satisfied. They nodded at the screen as if acknowledging something, and then spanned the laptop around to face me. There, on the screen, was another man. Again, his face was also covered with a balaclava to conceal his identity. The camera was zoomed into his face, so it was impossible to determine his location. Not that I was likely to be in a location to report it. You and your friends have been sticking your nose into my business, trying to bring everything that I've worked for down, trying to get Mr. Campbell here to rat us out. The man, whose voice had been distorted, stated with a seeded anger. I'm so sorry. They knew I was talking to you. I don't know how, but come on, I have a family, Campbell exclaimed, pleading his case. Oh, for crying out loud, Thomas, I yelled in distress. I said if I did it, then I was done with them. They wouldn't bother me anymore, he explained, his hands clasped in prayer, likely for forgiveness. I stared at him, noticing one of the men walking up to him. I glanced at the laptop and saw the man on the camera, grinning through his ski mask. I scoffed and shook my head at Campbell's naivety. That's right, we did. Sorry our arrangement has come to an end, but I'd sincerely like to thank you for all your assistance, Mr. Campbell, the man on the laptop said, as the thug marched up to Campbell and swung the blunt end of a claw hammer into the back of his skull. He screeched in a sharp outcry of agony as he dropped to his knees, clutching his head. The thug didn't let up, though. He and another of them were on him like white on rice. One with the hammer, the other with a crowbar. They laid into the prone coroner, smashing him to smithereens. I winced at the sound of blunt, hard steel impacting on wet flesh and broken bones, all the while Campbell groaning and moaning as the pain got worse and worse. But after a few painful seconds, the assault was over. The men stood back and began dragging the mangled, crimson-soaked corpse of Thomas Campbell over to the corner of the room, where a stretch of plastic sheeting was awaiting. Right then, Mr. Rodriguez. My boys are going to ask you questions, and you are going to answer, and I'm going to listen, the voice commanded. I was now convinced I was speaking to the notorious Mr. X. One of the men came round the back of me and grabbed my shoulders tightly, holding me in place. The other 2 fetched a couple of hammers from a nearby toolbox and took their places in front of me. What do the feds know about the country club? The man gripping my shoulders asked. Oh, fuck you, I muttered, looking at Mr. X on the screen. He grinned and shook his head. Wrong answer, he stated bluntly. I was busy justifying my outburst to myself when the hammer came down hard on my left kneecap. The bone splintered and cracked, and a white-hot pain burst through my entire leg. I screamed out in agony, desperately trying to hold my knee in pain, but the fact my hands were held in place made it so much worse. What do you know about the club? Who have you been watching? Surprised your little lapdog Marshall hasn't told you already, I muttered through deep breaths and agony-filled wheezing. Mr. X looked extremely smug as he addressed me. Oh, don't you worry. We're well aware of you looking into Mike Xavier. But I know you, James. After Paul Michaels was framed for the murder of Ian Malik, I know you'll be playing your cards close to your chest. So, my boys will ask you again. Who else do you know about? The thug yelled in my ear. I was desperately trying to figure a way out of this, but I couldn't see one. We don't know about anyone else, but it's only a matter of time until we figure out who's in your pocket, I snapped at them. The sound broke the unbearable silence after my outburst. A ringtone, coming from one of the thugs, wrapping up Campbell in the tarp. He pulled the phone from his pocket and looked confused at the number. He answered it. They were too far away to hear what the caller was saying, but after a few short seconds, the other thug snatched the phone from him and hung up the call. He was furious with him for answering it and began pointing at the body. My attention was brought back to my current situation by another hammer slamming into me, this time my right kneecap. Once again, the same process of obliterating agony and failed self-comfort ran its course. "Who is the rat?" the thug yelled this time. I practically couldn't hear him due to the pain, though. "My man asked you a question, Supervisory Special Agent Rodriguez," Mr. X prompted. Once again, I didn't answer because I was trying to work out what he meant. I received a sharp blow with a hammer to my right elbow for the delay in response. Nothing broke, but it hurt nonetheless. What rat? I've no idea what you're talking about," I assured. And this time it was the left elbow, and I cried out in pain again. "The person who works for me, but is on your fucking payroll. That's who. Believe me, I know it's not a cop, so it must be a Fed. Someone only with your clearance level would know. So come on, tell me, and I'll make sure you don't suffer anymore," Mr. X promised. "Well, I have honestly no idea what you're talking about," I muttered genuinely, the pain making it hard to function. Mr. X scoffed. You know, I actually believe you. Funny thing is, I don't actually need you. I was just giving you a chance to make this easier on yourself. Fact is, with you gone, I can make sure this investigation goes nowhere, and I'll be able to find out who your mole is for myself. So, I must say, it's been a pleasure knowing you, James. But I must go. Things to do, people to see. But don't worry, my boys will make sure you go out in style. Have fun." The thug holding my shoulders returned to the laptop, closed down the feed and shut it. He then reached into the toolbox himself and pulled out a hefty wrench. The next 20 minutes were pure hell. You know, in my life and career, I've experienced a lot of pain. I was stabbed during a mugging when I was 17, shot in the line of duty when I was 27, and shattered my pelvis and wrist in a head-on car crash during a high-speed pursuit at the age of 39. But what those men did to me, that fucking hurt. They started with my feet, hammering all 10 of my toes until they were bent and blue, blood seeping through the cracks in my toenails. Then they moved on to my shins. One swing of a crowbar into each, split them like bamboo sticks. The knees had already been seen to, so they moved on to my hands. My fingers looked like tree branches in the autumn after they had finished hammering the tips like nailheads, whilst they were held in position by the clamps. They'd taken about 3 turns each of walloping my gut and face with the crowbars. Puddles of blood and shards of my teeth were collecting at my feet. Both my eyes were seized 9/10 of the way shut, so I couldn't even see the blows coming to even attempt to brace myself. Oh, they were professionals. They'd ended Campbell in a matter of seconds. However, they knew how to keep me alive. They knew how to keep me awake. They knew how to make me suffer. "Come on, let's just put a bullet in this asshole and get out of here," I heard one of them suggest. Despite the blinding pain radiating through my broken body and the deaf tone ringing in my ears, I was horrified to hear the others agree. The sound of a gun cocking and more plastic sheeting being rolled out were the last things I heard before I began to black out. Must have been my brain releasing DMT into my system as it prepared to shut down for good, but I began to have the loveliest dream. Armed police came bursting through the door and opened fire. I got to feel the lovely soft skin of Ruth's palms against my battered and mutilated face one last time. I fucking loved that woman, and I never even got to tell her.
So there we go, that is the complete Part 2, Operation Appletree, The Return. And if all goes to plan in my world, I'll do the complete Part 3, The End, next Sunday. It's going to be another hour and a half's worth of storytelling, but yeah, I'll do that all in one go, because I think the tensions is getting to all of you a little bit too much. I've been teasing you with these shorter episodes, so nice to give another hour for you today. And yeah, like I said, we'll get it done next week. My thanks, as ever, to the wonderful author, Mr. Luke Hemingway, for this fantastic tale. I know it's got you all on the edge of your seats. Well, my dear friends, until the next time, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.